Modern dating feels strangely exhausting. Not dramatic, not catastrophic, just quietly draining. We live in a time where meeting people has never been easier, yet forming a real connection feels harder than ever. You can swipe through dozens of profiles, talk to multiple people at once, and still end up feeling unseen, not rejected, just replaceable. What makes this confusing is that, on the surface, things should be better. We have more freedom than any generation before us. We are no longer limited to our neighborhood, our family's expectations, or a small social circle. Marriage is optional. Commitment is flexible. Everything feels open. And yet, something feels wrong. In the past, love was constrained. People didn't search for the perfect partner. They married someone familiar, someone nearby, someone good enough. Romance mattered, but it wasn't the foundation. Stability came first. Feelings were expected to grow with time. Today, that order has reversed. Now feelings are treated as the entry requirement. We expect instant chemistry, immediate excitement, and emotional certainty early on. If it doesn't feel right quickly, we move on. There's always another option waiting. This creates a subtle shift. Instead of asking, "Can this grow?" we ask, "Is this the best I can do?" Freedom slowly turns into pressure. Because when everything is possible, choosing one thing feels risky. Commitment starts to feel like closing doors. Vulnerability feels dangerous when you sense the other person is still keeping their options open. That's when dating starts to feel broken. Not because people are heartless, but because the system rewards hesitation. When options are endless, depth feels inefficient. Why invest fully when something slightly better might appear tomorrow? So people stay cautious. They keep things casual. They avoid clarity. And over time, this doesn't just change how we date, it changes how we see ourselves. In the next part, we'll look at how too many options don't just overwhelm us, but quietly make us feel disposable. When people talk about modern dating, they often focus on behavior. Ghosting, mixed signals, non-commitment. But those are symptoms, not the cause. The deeper change is quieter and more unsettling. It's the way constant choice reshapes how we value people. When you're surrounded by endless options, comparison becomes automatic. You don't need to consciously judge. Your brain does it for you. Every interaction is measured against invisible alternatives. Every person is weighed against someone you haven't even met yet. This subtly shifts how connection works. Instead of asking whether something feels meaningful, we ask whether it feels optimal. Instead of leaning into uncertainty, we keep one foot out the door. Not because we lack empathy, but because the environment rewards restraint. The safest move becomes staying undecided. Over time, this changes how vulnerability feels. Opening up only makes sense when there's a reasonable chance the other person is doing the same. But in a system where everyone knows there are infinite exits, vulnerability starts to feel naive, risky, even irrational. So people protect themselves by staying casual, ambiguous, and emotionally light. And slowly, something else happens. You begin to experience yourself the way the system treats you, as an option, a profile, a temporary placeholder, until something better appears. Even when no one explicitly rejects you, the absence of commitment sends a message. You are easy to replace. This is where the feeling of disposability comes from. Not from personal failure, not from being unlovable, but from existing inside a structure that turns people into interchangeable units. When depth isn't rewarded, surface-level connection becomes the default. The tragedy is that most people don't want this. They want closeness, stability, and trust. But they're navigating a system that makes those things feel unsafe. So they adapt. And in adapting, they slowly lose touch with how valuable they actually are. In the next part, we'll explore what it takes to resist this dynamic without opting out of modern dating entirely. Resisting this dynamic doesn't mean rejecting modern dating or pretending the system doesn't exist. You can't opt out of the world you're in, but you can change how you move within it. The first shift is internal. Depth doesn't start with finding the right person. It starts with deciding how available you're willing to be. In a culture that rewards emotional minimalism, choosing to be present is already an act of resistance. Not reckless openness, not oversharing, just consistency. Staying when it would be easier to keep drifting. This doesn't guarantee safety, it guarantees clarity. The second shift is how you interpret rejection. In a high-choice environment, being passed over often says more about timing, distraction, or competing options than about your worth. If you internalize every non-commitment as a personal verdict, you'll slowly train yourself to disappear. Depth requires a different metric. Instead of asking whether someone fully chooses you immediately, notice whether they show up coherently. Do their words and actions align over time? Do they reduce noise rather than add to it? Stability isn't dramatic, it's repetitive. And repetition doesn't perform well in an attention economy, but it's how trust forms. The third shift is narrowing your field intentionally. Endless openness sounds mature, but it quietly drains energy. Fewer connections, taken more seriously, create the conditions where vulnerability makes sense again. Not because options vanish, but because attention is no longer fragmented. This is the paradox. You don't regain value by competing harder in the marketplace. You regain it by stepping slightly out of market logic altogether. By relating to people as people, not possibilities. This won't make dating easy, but it makes it human again. And that matters, because the goal was never to win the system. It was to stay intact while living inside it. If there's a way forward, it starts there. At some point, the question stops being about dating. It becomes a quieter question about how you want to live inside a world that never stops offering alternatives. A world that measures value in speed, visibility, and choice. Most people don't choose this mindset. They absorb it, until restlessness feels normal and stillness feels suspicious. The danger isn't ending up alone, it's ending up fragmented. When every connection feels provisional, you learn to hold yourself back. You stay light, you stay flexible, and over time that lightness costs something. Depth requires weight, presence requires friction. Neither survives easily in a system built around endless exits. What's lost isn't romance, it's continuity. A life made entirely of options struggles to take shape, and without shape, meaning becomes temporary. People aren't failing, they're adapting to a world that never asks them to stay, and yet staying is still possible. Not as a strategy, not as a performance, but as a quiet refusal to turn yourself into a product. A decision that some things deserve depth, even when depth isn't rewarded. The system will keep moving, options will keep multiplying. Meaning doesn't come from keeping doors open. It comes from knowing which ones you're willing to stand behind, and remaining there.